Hi, this is Ed again in San Diego, and welcome back to Global TV Talk Show. In just a few minutes, our special guest will be Robert Horsley, who's managing director of the FRAGOMEN law firm. I'm pretty sure this is the world's largest immigration law firm. And he's also the leader, I think the president, let's see what it says here, CEO of the company's new WorkRight Technologies enterprise. So Robert and I have known each other a very long time, and I'm really happy to have him on the Global TV Talk Show today. We're going to be talking about innovation and technology and where he sees AI and generative AI improving what we do in our companies and as a community. Well, that in itself will be quite a talk because I'm not a tech. So we're also going to be talking about digital transformation and how we as a community can learn more about that and be more receptive and make it work for us safely. So we'll be right back with Robert Horsley. And we're back, and here's Robert Horsley. Welcome.
Good morning, Ed. How are you?
Just great. Monday morning. You know, in downtown San Diego, right here in Seaport Village, we have dense fog. I'm looking out the window, and the Hyatt hotels, 50 stories high, they've disappeared. I don't see them anymore. So,
Lack of clarity on a Monday morning.
yeah,
Well, we've
that's
got
it.
fresh rain here in Northern California. How about that?
Oh, you're lucky. We need it. Send it.
Well, apparently we always send our water to Southern California, so there you go. And therein lies the Northern California, Southern California battle. We get the rain, you take it.
Yeah, we drain it right down. It comes this way, but not all the way to not all the way to San Diego. I think the LA Water Authority took care of that 150, 80 years ago or something with that movie Chinatown. That's what it was all
Yeah,
about.
that's
Yeah.
exactly. Well, having
Yeah.
having grown up in LA, I appreciated it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I moved to LA from Boston in 1980, um, I didn't understand all of that. But then I learned quick driving around. So
Yeah,
we're going to
they're
talk.
both really great places to live for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you are an evangelist for innovative tech in our industry. I'm reading this. Where do you see overall AI and generative AI improving us and the community? So first of all, define. And I'm not a tech. Uh, Define, please, overall AI and generative AI. What's the difference?
Well, generative it's constantly re-looking at itself. It's relearning, right, from scratch, if you will, and everything that's out there in its sphere of gathering knowledge, right? I think that it's a listen. I think it could really change our industry in a lot of ways. The things that we do on a more repetitive basis, we'll see lack of people doing that. We will so people can kind of trade up on the value chain is my thought. The things that are just done by people that are repetitive and don't require a lot of input. I think AI will take care of a lot of that. I think generative AI will continue to learn and be able to answer questions more on the fly. Listen, I think even at FRAGOMEN, we're using, right? I think we're very lucky. We have the largest immigration database meta information in the world by far, right? So if I think one of the dangers of AI is how great the answers are, right? I don't know, Ed, have you ever used Chat GPT or anything and asked it a question and the answer comes back perfect, though it's not right?
No, I'm chicken. I have not done it yet, but I'll tell you, when I use my phone, and I don't have to complete sentences because the words just come out all the time.
There's a great example of how I don't know what phone you're using, but Apple's definitely used that for a long time. I think that's a lower level um, use of AI, where generative, you can ask it a question and it's going to give you an answer back. Now, right now, in the big public forums, it's forming its answers, it's crawling the web, it's gathering information, it's learning. If somebody asks the same question 12 times, it's going to get better and better at answering the question. I think for our industry, the people that really hold lots of knowledge, like FRAGOMEN, we will have our own data lake, if you will, or information lake, where if you limit where you're getting that information, it can really be reliable. But I remember in the early days of ChatGPT, like their old days now. That's funny. But I asked it even about myself, and it made me sound really good, but none of it was right. So I think you have to be very careful on its use. But I think it'll change the way we do business for sure. In fact, I'm going to just down in your area, UCI. Have you ever been to UC Irvine? It's a great school.
Yes.
Okay, but they have a great business school. And I was talking to the dean of the business school, and somebody asked him a question. Is this going to change the way you have to examine students? Or are we going back to the blue books for those of us that are aged enough to remember blue books and you took your tests and you just wrote in pencil? And he had a great answer. He said, I hope not. I hope we don't return to that. I hope we see AI and it's positive that and how to help kids learn. We may have to, the exam may be a little bit different, but think of the power of how quickly people can learn with a tool that's got answers like that. Once we kind of put the guardrails around how to use it and how it gets information.
Well, that's great. Okay,
I
so
don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's a
yeah,
wide open
it
question.
does. So my phone is Android. It's Samsung Galaxy 7, and I love it. It's great. Okay, so let me
Well, mine
ask
is an
you.
Apple 15 Max, so it
Oh, good
tells
for
you I'm
you.
an early adopter. I'm right there the
Yeah,
day one usually.
that was
I
great.
I'd like
So
to
I
get my
have to
hands
tell
on
you
things
that
and
when I
see what's advanced.
relocated into LA in 1980, a long time ago, um, I I brought my business with me, which at that time was publishing relocation guides. And we had done a
Mhm.
Boston guide, and I sold it, and then uh, brought the idea out to LA with the LA Chamber. We called it California Bound Relocation Guide. And it was an immediate success. And I'm bringing that up because of early adoption. We were on the front cover of the computer magazines, the Apple computer magazines, because we were an early adopter of the desktop, the Mac. And we used that to design and make the magazine.
Desktop publishing, sure,
And that
they
was
were
in
early in on that.
1980. And so we had early knowledge. Now, I didn't do it. I had people do it, but they were right there in my office. And we figured it out. They figured it out. I just paid for it.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I worked for what's now known as KPMG a long time ago, and they were the first to buy a lot of what is the Mac, which was a box at the time, if you remember the commercial and all
All
that.
right.
So I was a user in my very first year working with KPMG of using the Mac back when it just had a little disk. So the world's come a long way. The more you understand about these things, the better off you are. I think it's one of my superpowers to be able to kind of connect dots of what's out there, what the problems are out there, and kind of connect it with what technology exists to be able to solve problems that we're really having. Not necessarily just having technology for technology and new gizmos, but how are you having it really solve problems that are out there?
So you and I have known
That
each
is a
other a
lot
very
of fun.
long time, and I really appreciate
Absolutely.
Austin Fragleman's benevolence towards me.
Me too.
So, but now you're CEO of WorkRight Technologies. It's an enterprise within Fragamen. So did you create that, or are you just connecting the dots, making it all work?
Oh, that's a great question. So just so people, aren't confused, I'm still with FRAGOMEN. I still play the role that I've kind of always played, making sure as I connect into the industry and making sure immigration is a well-known entity within the mobility space. I could go on a long time about what I think the mobility space is, and immigration as a strategy, and how important that's become, especially post-pandemic or during the pandemic, as everything became a little more nomadic and the like. But I'm also for the US version. So we started an organization called WorkRight, and it is all about technology. So this really is technology first. It is a technology that sits in the HR stack for onboarding, and it helps you document and facilitate the review of whether somebody has the right to work. And in my case here in the United States, it used to be called the I-9. Well, it is called the I-9. We used to call it the I-9 Service Center. Cindy Lang and I founded this several years ago. We've worked on it very hard to make it really simple, but not to sacrifice the sophistication that goes with a simple little form that is really not all that simple. And then with all the movement and all countries kind of getting their arms around wanting to make sure that people have the right to work in their countries, we made it global, and that's what WorkRight is. So WorkRight is a technology. It's kind of a compliance tool that fits in our compliance suite. It is all about facilitating organizations understanding whether their people have the right to work. And the new part of that is that we can do that on a global basis. I can go on and on about the side benefits of that, but the day one benefit is you're compliant. And if you're not, you can do something about it.
I like how you switch the words around. That's a genius. Right to work to work right technologies. I think
Wish I
that's
could
great.
take credit for that. I can't. We have some really smart people to think about things like that, but I agree with you. It's clever.
Okay, so new tech is, as I said, I'm chicken to use GBT, and I shouldn't be, but I just can't get there. I'm more of an ideas guy, not a tech guy, and it's a bridge too far, a lot for me. So how do I do that as a non-techie?
Well, listen, I think just be personal here for a second. A lot of people know, well, may or may or not. My mother passed at 98 years old about a month ago. Much harder for me than I ever thought it would be. But the reason I mentioned that, at 98, she was lucid until about the last 6 months. She had the e-ticket of life. I mean, 98, lucid, had grandkids talking to her every day. But the cool part is, in her early 90s, she learned to text. She learned to use her iPad. It's not an Apple commercial, but she looked at that phone all day long to get pictures of her family. She texted the kids every day to stay in touch. So if she's in her 90s, granted, she was a brilliant woman, and she was motivated. This is how her grandkids talked. This is how she could stay in touch. This is how she could see pictures of her great-grandchildren. This is how she could give me her grocery list every week and remind me of what I kind of got wrong on that grocery list every week. She learned to use technology and the like. She used DoorDash. Incredible. So how to use it? You use it. That's how you get good at it. You're motivated because you're going to see a benefit from it. And I guarantee you there are benefits from using these things. Their side, I think early on when many decades ago, when I was coaching my kids in baseball, I would be on the third base coaching box, and I'd have my little phone with me. A client would call, I'd be taking the call, I'd be telling the kids to slide, and it opened the world up. Right now, I'm not advocating that that's the way to work, but it opened 2 hours up for me a couple days a week where I could still stay in touch, right? But it made I had more of a leash. So I think over the years, we're trying to figure out not just the benefits, but the detriments of being that connected. But man, try it. OpenAI and try their Chat GPT feature. They're not the only ones out there. but it will definitely change the world. I would submit we have to be careful, and I would submit that it will move you up the value chain the more you know how to use it, and the more you can put your knowledge at work based on some of the information it's giving you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you very much for that confidence builder. But I also want to tell you about like my mom. She passed when she was 95, and her body gave out, started to give out when she, well, for years. But literally 10 days prior to her passing, and I was there holding her hand when she passed. Um, she was playing the New York Times crossword puzzle with her doctor in person. That's a week,
Right?
10 days before. And so uh, that gave me energy and wisdom, I think. It's still out there.
I think
But
wisdom's a good word. I think wisdom's a
well,
good word. I think
the
we
thing
somehow we
is
see
that
it as a negative, but I think it's a great word.
was fortunate enough to produce live meetings, as you know, for like 30 years. Starting, my first international meeting was in London in 97 at the Hilton just north of Marble Arch, just to give you an idea of that. And our very first live meeting was at the LA Chamber of Commerce in 1984 in October. Um, so my point
I
of
was just a
this
baby.
is that my point of saying all this in conjunction with your tech approach is that uh, when COVID came, the pandemic hit on or about March 1st of 2020, that crashed and burned my revenue source of live meetings, over 300 live meetings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I decided I better get comfortable in front of a camera on TV, on Zoom. And I started the Global TV Talk Show, ice cold lunch. And this now has become my happy place. And it's the technology.
Right.
It's not me. I'm certainly driving it, but it's the technology that is so simple and
Well,
genius that I'm
didn't
able
the
to use.
pandemic, it advanced us 10 years,
Yeah.
right? In just a matter of months, right? And by the way, I think it was March 11th was my last flight. And in 2020, not my last flight ever, but my last flight pre-pandemic or right in the middle of it. And the next day I was using more of Zoom and everything else more. And I found how you could be just as connected using a tool like this as long as your camera's on. And listen, the pandemic was or is or was a real eye-opener, horrible thing for many people. I think it changes for the better in many ways. We have to be much more intentional about being connected to a community. I think one of the things that I learned from it was the people that had communities outside of their office, right? They really survived a lot better than people that were completely about the office because they weren't going in anymore, but they had other communities they could tap into. So I think that is I really became a believer that was a paramount pillar to community, to well-being, I should say. Community was a paramount pillar to well-being, and not just any. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be connected to many different communities that brings some joy to my life and comfort. My wife is an executive coach and therapist, so I get that for free, whether I like it or not. We won't let her listen to this. Anyway, so hey, being able to tap into another community for your well-being, understanding that there are people there that can give you coaching, share their wisdom with you. Wisdom's a wonderful thing. We just talked about it. Being able to tap in not only from people that may have been there and done it and look at it from a different perspective, but I think I'm grateful for my own kids who are now in business themselves and teach me from that. I've really gone from being the teacher to the student in many ways. And how do I stay current? And we had dinner last night with all our kids. We had a Sunday night dinner. Everybody was here. He corrected me about how I think on everything. But it's a lot of fun, and I can give them a little bit of wisdom from time to time. But
Okay, now you've used the word community many times, and in the past, network was the word, but you use community, and that opened my eyes when you first started talking about this the other day. And I have since loved it even more, and I begin to use it myself. And once I get into it, the idea of community is, well, more than a family, but it's a resource.
absolutely. And I would encourage everybody to find their communities and open up, and the things that make, just like my mother, she wanted to be part of her family community digitally, right? She figured out how to do it, right? Their communities that deal with pets, their communities that deal with whatever turns you and gets you going in the morning. I mean, there are all sorts of them. So yeah, be part of it. Invite the coaching, invite people to critique or observe and the like. It will really advance you. I think that comes with a certain amount of security. But I think early on, the better the listener you are, the better you're going to, and the more effective you're going to be at actually providing information out there.
I'm taking
Community
notes here.
is huge. I think it's actually a perk that companies could give, is setting you up to be able to understand your communities and reach out to different communities. I think that's a little provocative, but I think it will help us bridge this, where people are being asked to go to back to work full time. Don't think that's going to really happen, but there are people that are really advocating for that. There are people that are really advocating for hybrid. There are people that are really advocating for remote. I think what that all comes down to is how do you effectively provide that opportunity? And by the way, I think it's an earned opportunity. So you need to make sure you can demonstrate that you can be effective, right, for your organization, that you can really contribute, that you really understand their culture. But the organizations themselves have to put in frameworks that will accommodate that.
So on November 30th, this is just an aside, it's not a PR, but it is. On November 30th, I'm producing a live meeting in the New York area, and Ernst & Young is graciously hosting my event. And they're using it for their own purposes, of course, to talk about compliances. And their new thing going forward into 24 is, and this is the theme, of reimagining, redesigning talent mobility and the development of it. Of course, the compliance issues always, but I'm using this to open up discussion about repatriation and taking better care of your talent, retaining it rather than chasing it away. And a lot of that, to me, in my perch as a PR kind of guy, is coaching. Just like you were saying, coaching the transferees and partner family, coaching the transferee while they are on assignment to be better, to explore the world where they are living at the moment, to be better and more valuable to the company and to themselves. And I know in the past we've had this discussion, and you thought it would be more on the person, not the company, to achieve that kind of growth. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to community again. I do think, and by the way, love EY. My father, sounds like I'm talking about my family this whole talk, but my father was a partner there for many years, and they took great care of him and my mother for many years thereafter. And I do think everything's being reimagined now, not just talent mobility. I think HR, how we work, how we do everything needs to be reimagined, because we went so quickly. It's connecting those dots again to see all. I think the biggest opportunity that exists right now for organizations is to figure out how to let and build frameworks to make sure people are being effective in these different work environments, whether it's nomadic, they're moving all around all the time. How do you do that compliantly? How do you let people work where they want to work because they're going to work more effectively if they can prove that they can? How do you support their talent journey through your own organization? I think if it's a perfect circle, there's a great book by Reid Hoffman, who was one of the PayPal 8, very big thinker here in Northern California. He also started LinkedIn. He's got a book called The Alliance, and it's all about kind of painting a picture to where a person can decide they can go inside their organization. If you want to be here, here are the skills you need. And here's the skills you're going to learn in this job. And it may not be here at this organization, but we're going to help you advance through your talent journey because we're really exposing the skills that you need to the 20 different ways you can go. And here are the skills you're going to learn. It's a little off topic, but I think it goes back to self-responsibility. You own your own journey, right? I think back when you stop staying at the same company for life, I think was around the same time when these companies said, we're not going to take care of you for life, right? The minute they said that, it became more the person's responsibility to start taking care of how they were going to retire, how they were going to save, what their next job was. And there are positives and negatives that come from this, right? You want to keep people because you don't have to retrain them about who your company is, but you also want to let them go and have experiences and potentially come back. And a perfect circle would enable you to get great people that do fit within your organization. It's about transparency in the workplace. Now, again, fairly provocative about being that transparent, but I think in the perfect world, it starts to work. Back to community, because that's what you asked me about. I do think that is also somewhat of a self-responsibility as we're talking about. There are lots of tools out there. You're talking about the expatriate that's somewhere. Well, what if you connected all those expatriates together so they're experiencing it so they can self-help themselves? Like, hey, I've already been through this. In fact, this is what I learned 3 weeks ago. Or so now they're kind of crowdsourcing within a safe environment the real life experiences, and you can tap into that before you go to see if this is even for you. But there's a great new company called Pivot that is all about communities. It's a startup
Lynn.
That's out there. I don't know if you know about that one, but
Lynn,
it's not just
Lynn
Pivot.
Greenberg.
Exactly. Lynn's a great young entrepreneur.
And she started that because of the problem she had as a young woman on assignment with Bloomberg in London. And she was lost. It was almost a disaster because she was so isolated.
Well, think about the theme we talked about here. My mother learned to text because she didn't want to be isolated from her family. Lynn started that. Everything really, necessity is the driver of innovation. I know I'm not the first one to say that, right? But, and I forget what the exact quote is. Somebody I'm sure knows that verbatim. But isn't it true? Isn't it true?
Yeah.
Innovation is driven. You don't have to.
Well, I needed to build a new business,
right? You just have to apply something that's out there.
Yeah, I need from the pandemic, crashing my live conference event business, my cash flow. I needed to create a pathway for new and different. And here we go.
Think of how many opportunities are out there, Ed, right? Think of how many opportunities. You did it to survive, right? You knew there was still a need. You didn't invent something like this. YouTube's been out there for a long time. Podcasts, one of my favorite things in the world, are listen to podcasts, the information I get from them. But you innovated in your world by taking something that was already invented and solving for a problem. I would submit that is a great way to look at the future. What problems exist? What's already out there that can help us solve that? And just iteratively, we're going to get a little bit better all the time. Again, I think one of the biggest opportunities when I look to invest and do things are these organizations that are putting forward a digital ability to let you work better, to give you more feedback, to help provide community for you, to solve this big space that I think there was a gap because we went so fast. Not that anybody doesn't see the importance of it. It's just it created a good gap.
I have to share something because it's the same idea, but done people to people. Last May 9, I produced a live meeting in London, uh, and I was hosted by the bank, the Global Trade Bank, HSBC, inside their headquarters in Canary Wharf. And that was the first live meeting since the pandemic in March, February. February 27 of 2020 was the last meeting that I produced live. It was in Washington on Embassy Row inside the historic home of President Woodrow Wilson. We sold out. The next day, boom, nothing. And so I was introduced to the bank in London through AGS, through Andrew Elliman, the European head, and he's friendly for many years with an executive within the bank who is in charge of the India high net worth corridor, as they call it. The diaspora of Indians who need a bank. Because they're high net worth. And so these guys got together and invited me to come to London to do my live meeting with them. And it was sufficiently successful for those guys. They invited me to come back and do it again. So I'm doing it on December 7, again in London inside HSBC. But they said the May 9th meeting was good. We filled the room. They said, too many speakers. Let's have a workshop environment, a community, to use your word. And that's what I've set out to do. And now it's not only going to be in person, but we have a virtual segment also. And
I
so,
think that's really smart, Ed.
I
think what you're describing,
big.
I think what you're describing at the core, right, was you asked at the beginning about network, right? I think knowing people and meeting people, and I see network as more business development and connecting dots of who you know and what's out there. I will call that your network. Again, I think community exists, and it's probably networks are probably a subset of community in a way.
It's personal.
The community is bigger, and it's not just again, in my head at least, and I'm probably a little misguided. I think a network is a little bit more business development wise. But I think you're onto something with workshops. Lately, as opposed to just panels where they feed you information, which is fine. We've done panels forever. You get great panelists that let the banter go on. You learn a lot. But I think workshopping is even more important. You get everybody involved, right? You set out to solve a problem, and they you facilitate. So the leaders are more facilitators, maybe put a couple ideas out there, but I think it's a much more powerful way, whether that's in person or virtually. I think we'll see technologies that allow more of that, but yeah, I think workshopping is the way to go. In fact, I was at WERC, probably the best ERC event in a long time, and hats off to Anupam and Ashley and Tyler and their whole team for putting on a great event this year. Lots of people, lots of enthusiasm, and I think part of that is because people hadn't experienced being together a whole lot. But their panels were all about workshops and really working with people to gain a better understanding and walk away with something. I think that's always been my thing. I want somebody to walk away with something after it's done. What do we want them to feel or go do? And I think workshopping is a much more effective way to do it than talking at somebody. And here I am.
You just used the word earlier about a community of expats, crowdsourcing, and that's perfect. Bingo. Crowdsourcing.
Yeah. Well, Michael Caden tried to do it probably a little bit before his time. If you remember living abroad, I know he's a good friend of yours. Kind of a Facebook-like product. I think technology's gone a long way. People are much more comfortable about sharing. You have to do all these things in safe environments, for sure, because not everybody is well intended in the digital space. I think we've learned a lot about that. But if you can make it safe, you can make it so you can build relationships, get information, again, not be just driven at you, but that is available to you. And again, I will tell you, just all the way back to the beginning, I think this is where ChatGPT, chat-like features that can go into reliable data sources, reliable knowledge sources, and help you provide information. How have people done that? How have people solved for this? Where can I get that? It puts it at your fingertips. It puts it at your fingertips. You don't have to wait. It's right there. And isn't that a great use of some of these tools?
Yeah. Robert Horsley, I thank you for being my guest in this conversational global TV talk show, and I welcome you to come back and do it again.
Hey, I'm happy to. And let me just take a minute to thank you. You have been you're one of the first people in the industry that really embraced me and showed me the way into the mobility space and helped me build a network within that community. And I've never forgotten it. And I can trace it all the way back to one of your meetings in Houston, Texas. So, I've tried to pay that forward over the years and make sure that people have the opportunities to meet people. I think it's one of the first things I do all the time is hey, Bill, have you met Sally? When you're busy talking, and I think it goes a long way. So I have a lot of time for you. Thank you for doing what you did for me. It's a great industry.
I remember
really
one of the best things we did together, and Austin spoke, keynoted at it, and it was held in New York City inside KPMG. And this is a long time ago now. And we had as our super guests from Caterpillar Corporation, the psychologist, Dr. John Pompey, and the Chestnut Global Partners at the time was their healthcare advisor, provider or something. And they figured out that they had to take better care of, they had a duty to care, not duty of care, of the expats, because they proved that there was an ROI in taking better care of expats, taking better care of the expat family. They proved it. They measured it. And that filled that room. There must have been 500 people in that room. And it was terrific. To this day, I recall the pleasure of doing
Well,
that.
I think foundationally, FRAGOMEN, I think when we made the leap, we've always been very communicative. We've always, I think, been great at what we do, but we made the leap back in the late 90s to provide information very transparently to the people we work with so they could get real-time information. It was revolutionary at the time. And the thought being is the more they knew and the more they could stop thinking about their immigration case 24/7. They knew somebody had their back. They could see what was happening behind the scenes. That drove well-being, and it drove them being more productive at what they did because they didn't have to think about this all the time. And you mentioned Austin. How lucky am I to have worked with people like Austin FRAGOMEN, talk about an innovator, and probably the brightest person I've ever met. And then Cindy Lang and working really closely with Lance Kaplan and Enrique Gonzalez and others today that are really, they drive innovation. They drive the way we're thinking about working with governments and thinking about how you're just going to pass through checkpoints. And it's going to have a lot more to do with how technology is used at the government level and at your personal level. So there's a lot out there. Great for somebody with my tenure in the industry that can keep up with what's changing. Again, you don't have to invent this stuff, but you can be very innovative in our space to how it's applied. So I would invite people to keep your eyes open, share a lot, and introduce people all around as much as you can.
Just to sum up, I remember that Austin FRAGOMEN is so bright, deliberative, generous, for sure. And he says, you can't fight compliance. You have to be compliant. Everybody has to be compliant. So figure out how to get it done. And then you did it. You implemented that and talked about it in the industry.
And again, one of my favorite things to say is that you can't fight gravity. right? Because gravity is
That's
going to
right.
win every
Boom.
time. So the future is gravity. Future, gravity is compliance. So embrace it. Get there early. I think that's my concept on early adoption. Is it's coming. Start figuring it out and using it. It's not always going to work, but if you see the goodness in these things, don't use things deviously, but you see the goodness in them and you adopt early. Again, gravity's going to win every time. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. And thank you, Anita. Appreciate it. Take care. Thank you.